Double-Edged Destiny, a Fracture's Alternative Universe fanfiction by Doglover61402/The Christian Ninja. Chapter 7, Blazing Lies. The time is 2 weeks after Chapter 6, and the setting is the Frostborn Castle. The cold wind racing across the tundra bit Rain's body. As he sat on the balcony of the castle, he wrapped his blanket tightly around him and pulled his knees up to his chest. It was half an hour past midnight, and gray clouds blacked out the stars and moon. Heavy snow fell, but an awning provided Rain some shelter from the precipitation. Tears fell on his face, and he wondered if the weather might freeze the drops on his skin. He buried his head in his knees. Today marked the passing of another month since Glacierford's fall. Although he already lived with the memories of this day constantly hounding his mind, they were always worse on the monthly anniversaries. 3 candles sat 2 blocks in front of Rain. One candle burned in honor of everyone from his city who died to Herobrine's attack. 2 of the lights represented the people from Glacierford he missed the most, Abigail and his brother Fred. Countless souls had been taken, and Rain had even lost his life. He wished to hold a small candlelight vigil for the dead, but the violent winds had snuffed all but one flame. He sheltered the 3rd candle next to a wall, hoping to keep its flame alive. Rain had been the only one to cheat death by returning as his nation's undead super soldier. No one else had been as fortunate as him. His friends, family, and neighbors were gone, leaving him as the only survival. Lonely was the only word to describe how he felt. A particularly heavy blast of frozen wind roared into the balcony. Rain looked up in time to see the wind extinguish the last candle's life. Surrounded by nothing but wind and the night, he felt even more alone than he had just moments before. Rain? The dragon tamer jumped, surprised by a familiar voice. He slowly glanced behind him, barely having the mental energy to even move his head. "Ceres," he said, his voice trailing off in the wind. "How did you know I was out here?" He lowered his head once more, resting it on his shivering knees. Ceres, who did not have a heavy coat in this dimension, stepped onto the balcony wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes scanned the setting. 3 darkened candles sat 1 block away from her friend, who had shaped himself into a small ball. Snow piles gradually grew in size, and the wind and snowfall blurred together, painting the air white. "A guard woke me up to let me know that you were out here. Are you okay?" She stepped closer to Rain. Rain sealed his eyes shut in embarrassment. To get out to the balcony, he had snuck through the castle, carefully avoiding the guards. While he did not mind Ceres finding him, he dreaded one of the guards alerting Patrick of this solemn moment. Even though Patrick feared the end matriarch too much to harm Rain physically, the dragon tamer still faced his cruel remarks and mockery. "Don't worry, I made the guard swear to secrecy. No one will know about this," Ceres said. "Thanks," Rain mumbled. His thoughts were so messy right now, but he could not figure out how to answer Ceres' question. I don't know where to start. I have no idea what there even is to say." Rain's voice cracked. His head spun from the whirlwind of emotions and memories in his brain, and the wind only made the mental dizziness worse. Rain had longed for the moment someone took genuine interest in his sufferings. Yet now that this moment had arrived, he felt afraid to share his thoughts. These secrets had stayed locked inside of his mind for months. Fear filled his chest as he considered releasing them. "That's okay. I know you've been through A lot. If you want to talk about it, I'll stay and listen to whatever you want to say. Or I can just sit here with you in silence. If you'd rather, I'll even leave you alone, Sarah said. Her expression was soft, with true care for her friend, but worry also scratched wrinkles into her face. Rain thought about her offer for a moment as the wind continued to freeze him. Please stay, he said, in a voice so full of pain it emerged as a whisper. He still had not opened his eyes, but he heard her walk to his side and sit down with him. She covered him with the blanket and rested her arm on his back. He began to cry with sobs that shook his body. Rain? Sarah asked quietly as he shook. You're worrying me. Sorry, Rain said. His words were barely audible through his crying. He drew in a deep breath, trying to calm himself down. After several breaths, his emotions calmed down enough to have a conversation with Saris. It's been 6 months. 6 months ago today, the first zombie got into Glacierford. By the end of the day, the city was gone. It was just me and a few others. Saris leaned her head on Rain's shoulder, trying to comfort her friend. A long period of silence followed. As she thought about her next words, the candles caught her attention again. Do those candles have anything to do with those people? Rain sniffed. His only friend's presence helped alleviate his pain a little. Yeah, actually. One of them is for everyone. A lot of people died that day. The ones in the cities and the others, the ones who got out with me didn't last more than 2 days. None of us did, but the other two, therefore. He stopped talking. Thinking about these loved ones made him feel sick. Fred and Abigail. Fred was my little brother. He was the last family member I had alive. Abigail, she wasn't family, but my sweet Abby, she was my first girlfriend. Why couldn't I have saved them? Saris patted Rain's shoulder. It's not your fault. None of it was your fault. It's a war. A war started by someone who wants to see good people like you and your friends suffer. Patrick said it was my fault. That I should have done better to save them. Rain clenched one hand into a fist. He said he would never let Azura die the way I let Abigail die. All words and the ability to speak left Rain. The only sound he could mutter were horrible sobs of mental agony. For several minutes, he remained in this state. 2 storms raged around him. One entrapped his mind, the other layered snow around the pair. The only things he felt other than the storms were his friend's arms, wrapped around him. The snowstorm around them picked up its pace, and the wind drowned out the noise of his crying. Rain, Sarah said, urgently. Rain barely heard her voice above the wind. It whistled through his ears, reminding him of the people's fearful screams 6 months ago. A part of him wanted to blame the wind for his problems, since it had snuffed out the flames on his vigil. But he knew these thoughts were delusional. A man with glowing eyes and a thirst for causing suffering had snuffed the life out of his loved ones. Suddenly, Saris's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. He looked at her, still too lost in his thoughts to reply audibly. We shouldn't be out here in a storm like this. I'm taking you inside. Sarah shouted above the wind. She stood up and grabbed her friend's hands, helping him rise. The frozen blankets fell to the ground, but she decided to leave them outside for now. She had to help guide Rain, who could barely walk due to his fragile mental state, into the castle. They went to the living room together, traveling by teleportation to avoid being seen by the guards. Rain sat on the floor in front of the fireplace while Sarah stirred a fire. The dragon tamer, still distraught, now felt numb. His expression turned emotionless, and he glanced at a clock above the fireplace. It was close to 1 in the morning. Rain took a deep breath as Sarah piled several blankets on top of him. "Thanks," he muttered. He stretched his muscles, which were sore from sitting in the freezing weather. He felt the warmth of the fire melting the coldness inside his bones. He glanced at Saris, who sat a block to his left. "Saris, you can go back to your room if you want. You've already done more to help than anyone else has. I don't want to keep you up like this." "If you want, I'll go, but if you want someone to talk to, I am here for you," Sarah said with a smile, bringing a look of relief to Rain's face. "Just talk about whatever's on your mind." Rain pondered this prompt for a moment. Although sharing his experience still felt scary, a spark inside of him encouraged him to continue this conversation. He searched his mind for the next thing to share. The image of Abigail entered his mind, calling back the good times he had shared with her in Glacierford. Abigail. Rain actually forged a smile as she returned to his mind. "After my brother and I moved to Glacierford with our aunt, I met her. We were the same age, only 5 days apart, so we entered military training at the same time. Outside of training, we spent so much time together. She introduced me to her friends, who soon became my friends too. Without her, I would have been completely lost in a new city. Over time, I guess I just realized I had feelings for her." "Feelings?" Saris had a puzzled look on her face. What does he mean, he had feelings for a person? Doesn't everyone feel a certain way about everyone they meet? She wondered. Rain chuckled. "I guess they don't use that term in the end. But what I mean is, I fell in love with her, and she fell in love with me. We started dating at 14 years old, and then death took her from me at 19. A tear forced its way out of his eye. "Is Abigail the ginger-haired girl in the picture on your shelf?" Saris asked. Rain nodded. "She was beautiful, but she's gone." He sighed and stood up. "Thanks for listening. This is the only time anyone has ever sat here and let me tell them everything. It's given me a bit of peace, and I know that Abigail is at peace now." He stared into the roaring flames, wondering if he could believe the words he had just said. The scene is now somewhere else in an unknown location. Anger flickered like a fire on his student's face. A blow during their mock battle had sent her into the netherrack outside the platform in the training yard. The fighter pushed herself off the ground and retrieved her spear. Frustrated, her foot sent a rock flying through the cavernous environment. "Abigail!" he called, in his raspy voice, displeased. Abigail turned to face her skeletal mentor, a mage named General Naeus. Irritation and ash covered her face. She rolled her eyes. "Yeah, I know. If I can't best you in training, I'll never defeat my opponents in the arena. You've said it 100 times. Abigail huffed and returned to the bounds of the practice arena. You would be dead if this were a real fight, Princess. I took great pains to retrieve your body from the overworld when you died on your mission, Naeus said. We only have 2 weeks until the contest. I will not have you making me look like a foolish mentor by dying first. As he looked at Abigail's angry face, he narrowed his eyes, which consisted merely of glowing lights within his skull's eye sockets. You said that 100 times too! Abigail yelled. Her voice echoed through the cavern. She slammed the lower end of her spear into the floor of the arena. Let's fight one more time. I promise, I'll defeat you this time. She changed her slouched standing position into a lunged fighting stance. Naeus sighed. Your left leg is too far forward, and you're holding your spear too low. He shook his head, trying to decide his next actions. Like his student, he too grew frustrated. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw his comrade, General Kralos, walking toward him. The sight of this skeleton reminded Naeus that he and Kralos needed to have a private conversation. He decided to send his student home to read her nether history books. We've been out here for hours. You should take a break from training. Go inside and read the books I assigned you. Although his order seemed to irk the princess more, she complied without saying a word. Kralos approached Naeus as he watched Abigail return to the skeleton section of the nether fortress. How was her training today? Kralos asked. His voice was deep, and it echoed from his bony body. Naeus clenched his bony hand into a fist. Terrible! Zarkos said the necromancy that turned her corpse into a netherkin should make her one of the most powerful warriors this world's ever seen. At first, I thought he was right. She learned every lesson I taught her excellently. But she can't seem to complete this one final task. 6 months ago, he had retrieved Abigail's body from the overworld. The human who had desperately fled a zombie apocalypse became his confident demon prodigy. He hoped to enter Abigail into King Glutton's tournament for the Nether Star, but he feared his student would not be ready. Naeus's long-term plans hinged on her victory in the arena. What is this final task? Kralos asked. Defeat me in a mock battle. She needs to prove that she can handle difficult opponents. But... Naeus paused. Maybe I have not had enough time. Naeus wondered if 6 months of training was enough to prepare the demon for her battle. Even if it was not, he had no time now to start over with a better student. Does she still believe all the lies you told her? Kralos asked. He and Naeus had a close enough relationship that they could freely discuss Naeus's rise to power in the Nether Kingdom. Remember, some of it is truth. The Nether Star is a family heirloom of hers that King Glutton stole years ago. It is her birthright, Naeus said. But yes, she still truly believes she was always a Netherkin, and that we sent her to the overworld to investigate Herobrine. Fortunately for Naeus, the girl had lost her memories when she died in the zombie attack. His power for manipulation was great, allowing him to control the truths she believed about herself. However, he also wanted physical power, and Abigail was the key to this. Don't worry too much, Naeus. If she has learned all your lessons so far, then I am sure she will be able to meet your expectations. She has a great deal of respect for you. I trust her to strive toward your standards. Kralos lightly punched Naeus in the shoulder. Naeus did not speak for a moment. He stared off into the distance, watching the lava flowing down into the ocean below. He groaned. Ugh. I hope you are right, Kralos. I need to go inside now. I must see if she is studying her nether history like I told her. She does everything you ask her to do. I don't think you even need to bother checking, Kralos said. Negus walked away from the arena, preparing to return to his lodging. Whatever, Kralos. His friend did not understand the stress Negus carried. He entered the nether brick building. The wither skeletons, along with Abigail, resided at the north end of the maze-like building. The pigmen lived in the west section, and the blazes lived in the south. The eastern regions of the fortress were used for official business. While anyone was free to traverse any kind of section, tensions filled the air like the smoke of the fires. The pigmen and withers had been known for wars throughout the years, and the only thing preventing the species from fighting right now was a fragile truce. The blazes tended to side with the pigs, making Negus and the skeletons feel outnumbered. A group of pigmen walked down the hall, heading in Negus' direction. The skeletons stepped to the side, walking along the wall in order to accommodate their presence in the hallway. The pigmen, who spanned the width of the hallway, were not as polite and allowed themselves to bump into Negus, snorting in mockery as they traveled. The general's bones rattled in anger. He despised the pigmen. The fragile truce had been catered to favor the pigs, and leadership by the swine kind, King Glutton, made Negus feel as if the skeletons were underappreciated. This is why I want to shove your stupid king off this fortress, Negus hissed when the pigmen were out of earshot. In the general's mind, the skeletons needed their turn to rule. He would prove that they could rule better than the pigmen. He entered his quarters and knocked on the door to Abigail's room. Come in, she said. She still sounded upset. Negus pushed the door open, seeing Abigail lying on the floor of her room. A disinterested look covered her face. She flipped the page to her history book, but her eyes did not seem to focus on the words before her. He approached Abigail and sat on the floor next to her. What does this chapter cover? He asked. Another war, she said, unenthusiastically. Which one? Negus asked. She turned back to the beginning of the chapter. The 50-year War of the Basalt Deltas. She sighed and face-planted into the book. Listen, I'm sorry I'm such a disappointment. I'm just going through a lot. I spend hours of the day training or refreshing my memory on everything dying caused me to forget. I am stressed about the contest, and I keep having weird dreams about being a human. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Negus stayed quiet for a moment while his student picked her head back up and attempted to read. The dreams she mentioned worried him, as they hinted at her actual memories returning. However, his talk with Kralos put another dilemma in his mind. He started to feel guilty for causing her such anxiety, especially since she would bring honor to the Withers if she won the contest. I should be the one to apologize, Princess. I am the one who has put you through this stress. You still have 2 weeks to finish your training, and I do have confidence in you. Abigail blinked twice as she stared into the pages. Really? Negus nodded. I do. You are truly doing fine in your training, and do not let these dreams worry you. It's natural to have confusing dreams after dying and returning to the undead state. He knew this was a lie, but he feared letting his student believe her real memories. You will regain the Nether Star and take back your throne. I have faith in you. Abigail sat up and smiled. She brushed a tear away from her eye. Thank you. She hugged the skeleton, creating the noise of a bony crunch. Naeus jumped when the girl grabbed him, but he relaxed his bones and hugged her back. Her naivety would help him conquer the Nether and the worlds outside of the hellish cavern.